I noticed it the moment he asked about the house. Not the first time. The first time, I thought nothing of it. He was new to the family, curious, making conversation the way people do when they're trying to fit in. But it was the third time, the fourth time, always circling back to the same questions. Always with that same easy smile that somehow never quite reached his eyes. That was when something in my chest went quiet and still. My name is Margaret, and I am 63 years old. I have lived in the same house in Oakville, Ontario for 31 years. I raised my daughter Claire in that house. I buried my husband, Robert, from that house. And I had no intention of letting anyone take it from me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually began. Robert passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, swift, cruel, the kind that gives you just enough time to say goodbye but not enough time to make peace with it. He was 59. We had been married 34 years, and I won't pretend those years were perfect, because no marriage is, but they were ours, and losing him left a silence in this house that I am still learning to live inside. He'd been a civil engineer with the city of Hamilton for most of his career, careful with money the way people who grew up without much tend to be. We had the house paid off. We had his pension through OMERS, the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, which paid out a survivor benefit to me each month. We had RRSPs and a TFSA that he'd been quietly building since his 30s. And we had a small rental property in Burlington, a 2-bedroom unit that Robert had bought years before I met him, and that generated steady income every month. None of this was extravagant. We drove practical cars. We took one trip a year, usually somewhere in Canada. Claire grew up understanding that money was not something you showed off, it was something you protected. Robert used to say that wealth was not about what you spent, it was about what you never had to worry about. After he died, I had the estate sorted carefully with our lawyer, Patricia Chen, who had been handling our family's legal affairs for 15 years. Everything was documented. Everything was in order. Claire was listed as my beneficiary on the TFSA and the life insurance policy. The house would pass to her through the will. The rental property was in a holding company that Robert had set up, and Claire was named in that structure as well. I told Claire about the general shape of things, the way any sensible parent would. Not every number, not every account, but enough so that she understood our family was secure and that she would be taken care of. I should have been more careful about who was sitting next to her when I said these things. His name was Daniel. Claire brought him home 14 months after Robert passed, which I understood she was 31. She had grieved her father, and she had every right to move forward with her life. He was 35, worked in financial consulting, which he described in ways that always sounded impressive and somehow never quite explained what he actually did. He had an easy manner, the kind that fills a room without seeming to try. He remembered details: my favorite tea, the name of the neighbor's dog, the fact that I preferred decaf after 6. People like that tend to make you feel seen. They also tend to know exactly what they're doing. The first time he asked about the house, we were sitting on the back porch. It was August, one of those heavy southern Ontario evenings when the air smells like cut grass and the lake isn't far enough away to forget. Claire had gone inside to get more iced tea, and Daniel leaned back in his chair and looked out at the yard. "This is a beautiful property," he said. "Big lot for Oakville. How long have you had it?" 31 years, I said. "Must be worth considerably more than what you paid." I agreed that it was, and left it there. He nodded in that thoughtful way he had, and when Claire came back out, the conversation moved on. The second time was at Christmas. We were washing up after dinner, Claire and Daniel and I, and he asked whether I had ever thought about downsizing now that it was just me in the house. "Not particularly," I said. "It's just a lot of space for one person," he said, pleasantly enough. "And the market in Oakville right now, you'd do extremely well. You could find something smaller, put the difference somewhere, it's really working for you." I said I was comfortable where I was. The third time was in February, and this time he asked specifically about the rental property in Burlington. He had been doing some reading, he said, about holding companies and the tax implications for estate planning. He wondered whether I had thought about restructuring. I said that my lawyer handled those matters. He said that made sense, and smiled, and changed the subject. That night, after he and Claire had gone home, I sat at the kitchen table with my tea going cold in front of me, and I thought about those 3 conversations. Each one, on its own, was nothing. Together, they formed a shape I did not like. I called Patricia the following morning. Patricia is the kind of lawyer who does not alarm easily, which is exactly why I value her. I told her about the conversations, the property questions, the restructuring suggestion, the pattern of it. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Margaret, I think you should hold off on sharing any further financial details with anyone outside this office until we've had a proper conversation. Can you come in Thursday?" I came in Thursday. What Patricia explained to me over the next hour was not, she was careful to say, an accusation. It was a framework for understanding risk. In Ontario, a surviving spouse or common-law partner has certain rights under the Family Law Act, rights to equalization of net family property, rights that can complicate even clearly documented estates if someone is determined to pursue them. A will can be challenged. A holding company structure can be scrutinized. None of these things are insurmountable, but they require preparation, and the best preparation is documentation, clarity, and keeping your affairs tightly managed. She also said something that stayed with me. The questions you're describing, the sequence of them, the specificity, those aren't the questions of someone making polite conversation. Those are the questions of someone building a picture. I drove home slowly that afternoon. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention. I noticed that Daniel had begun coming to the house more often when Claire was not with him, dropping something off, picking something up, always with a reason. Each time, the conversation would find its way, almost casually, to something financial. Once it was property taxes in Oakville and how they'd gone up. Once it was interest rates and what that meant for people with rental income. Once, and this one made my stomach turn, he mentioned, offhand, that he had a colleague who specialized in powers of attorney and capacity planning if I ever wanted a referral. I was 63 years old. My mind was perfectly sharp. I knew exactly what a power of attorney was and exactly why he had brought it up. I did not show him that I knew. I thanked him for the thought and offered him a biscuit. That same week, I made an appointment with my family doctor, Dr. Anand Patel. I told him I wanted everything documented: my cognitive health, my physical health, a complete record of my current capacity and well-being. He looked at me carefully over his glasses and asked if there was a specific reason. I told him I was being cautious. He ran a full assessment. He noted in my file clearly that I was in excellent health, cognitively and physically, and that there were no concerns whatsoever regarding my decision-making capacity. He also and I had not asked him to do this, but I was grateful noted that I had initiated the appointment myself, independently, without prompting from any family member. I also changed my online banking passwords. I reviewed every beneficiary designation on every account and policy. I had Patricia prepare an updated declaration of my wishes, signed and witnessed, and I had her hold the original deed to the house in her office safe. Not because I thought anything had happened yet, because I did not intend to let anything happen. Claire, through all of this, was happy. That was the hardest part. She was genuinely happy with Daniel, lighter than I had seen her since her father died. Laughing easily. Making plans. She talked about a future with him the way you do when you have decided someone is the person. I did not want to be the mother who poisoned that. I did not have proof of anything. I had a pattern of questions and a very cold feeling in my stomach. So I watched. And I waited. And I kept what I knew close. In April, Daniel proposed. Claire called me from the car, crying happy tears, and I told her I was thrilled for her. I meant part of it. The engagement brought new energy and new conversations, and with them, new opportunities for Daniel to raise familiar subjects. He suggested gently that it might make sense for Claire to be added to the house title before the wedding for simplicity, he said, for practical reasons. He mentioned that a friend of his had gone through probate after a parent died, and it had been a long, expensive process, and wasn't it better to sort these things in advance? I said I'd think about it. I called Patricia that afternoon. Patricia said, "Do not add anyone to the title." She reminded me of something important, that in Ontario, if a property is transferred into joint ownership and the relationship later ends, the other party may have a claim to that property under the Family Law Act, depending on the circumstances. Adding Claire now, before a marriage that had not yet happened, and while Claire was in a relationship with someone whose motives I did not trust, was not prudent. The house stayed in my name alone. But something else happened that April that I had not anticipated. Claire came to see me alone one afternoon, without Daniel. She sat down at the kitchen table where she had done her homework as a child, where she had eaten 10,000 breakfasts, and she looked at me with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression she'd had at 12 years old, when she was trying to figure out how to tell me something difficult. "Mom," she said, "I need you to be honest with me." I told her I was always honest with her. "Do you like Daniel?" I took a breath. "I love you," I said. "That's what matters most to me." She looked at the table. "That's not the same thing." I was quiet for a moment, and then I said, "I have some concerns. Not about you. About certain conversations I've had with him, about questions he's asked." She looked up. I did not tell her everything, not the lawyer, not the doctor's appointment, not the changed passwords, but I told her about the questions, the property in Burlington, the title, the power of attorney referral. I laid them out in the order they had happened, without editorializing, just the facts of what had been said and when. Claire was very still while I talked. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, quietly, "He told me you'd offered to help us with a down payment. On a house." I had never said any such thing. The color left her face slowly, the way it does when something you have been choosing not to see becomes suddenly, unavoidably clear. She left that afternoon without resolving anything, and I did not push her. She needed time to sit with what she now knew. I understood that. The mind protects itself, and she had been happy, and unmaking happiness is slow work. What I did not know, what I could not have anticipated, was what she was going to do with what she'd learned. The wedding was planned for the third Saturday in September, at a vineyard in Niagara-on-the-Lake, 110 guests. Claire had chosen a simple dress, ivory, no train. She had carried cream roses and eucalyptus in her bouquet. I sat in the front row. Daniel's family sat on the other side, his parents, a brother, a few cousins. He had many friends, charming people who laughed easily, and I noticed, watching them arrive, that none of them seemed to know Claire particularly well. The ceremony began at 4 p.m, with the sun still high and warm, that particular golden light you only get in September in the Niagara Peninsula. The officiant was a warm woman named Karen, who had known Claire since university. The music was a string quartet. Robert had loved live music, and I knew Claire had chosen it partly for him. I held myself very carefully through all of it. I watched Daniel standing at the end of the aisle in his dark suit, that easy smile in place, and I thought about everything I knew and everything I couldn't prove, and the fact that my daughter was walking toward him in ivory and cream roses. Claire reached the altar. And then, before she turned to face Daniel fully, she turned to me. Just for a moment, just long enough. She reached into the bouquet, her fingers finding something tucked among the stems, and she pressed a small folded piece of paper into my hand. Our eyes met. She squeezed my fingers once, and let go. I opened the paper in my lap, slowly, keeping my hands still. It said, "Mum, I found the emails. I have copies. Do what you know is right. I trust you." I folded it closed. I put it in my purse. I sat with it for exactly 45 seconds, which felt like a very long time. Then I stood up. There is a particular kind of silence that happens when a person stands at a wedding at a moment when no one expects anyone to stand. It falls over a room like a held breath. I felt it fall. I felt every face turn toward me. I said, "I'm sorry to interrupt. My name is Margaret. I am Claire's mother. And before this ceremony continues, there are some things that need to be said." Daniel's smile did not move. That, more than anything, told me everything. I spoke for perhaps 4 minutes. I did not raise my voice. I described the pattern of questions, the property, the title, the power of attorney, the down payment that had never been offered. I said that Claire had discovered emails. I did not know their full contents, but she had told me she had copies, and that she trusted me to act on what I knew. I said that I had spent the past 6 months consulting with a lawyer and a physician, both of whom had documented everything carefully and could confirm that my mind and my affairs were entirely in order. I said, "Daniel, I don't know everything you planned, but I know enough, and so does my daughter." Daniel's mother made a sound. One of his friends started to say something, then stopped. The officiant, Karen, stood very quietly with her hands folded. Daniel looked at Claire. Claire looked at him with an expression I had not seen on her face before, perfectly calm, the way a lake goes calm before a storm breaks. She said simply, "I found the emails to the financial consultant. The ones about the holding company. The ones about my mother's capacity. I've already forwarded them to her lawyer." The vineyard was very quiet. Daniel said, "Claire, this is not—" "I'd like you to leave," Claire said. "Please." He left. His parents followed, and his brother, and most of his friends, in a shuffling, mortified procession through the Niagara September afternoon. A few of them paused to look at Claire with something that might have been apology. She did not acknowledge them. When they were gone, Karen the officiant asked the room if anyone needed a moment. Someone laughed, a little helplessly, and then the whole room exhaled. What happened afterward is harder to describe, because it was quieter than everything that came before. Claire and I sat together on a bench in the vineyard garden while the guests sorted themselves out and the catering staff very discreetly refreshed the drinks. She told me about the emails Daniel had been corresponding with a financial consultant about strategies for accessing my RRSP assets and the Burlington property through Claire's legal standing as a spouse. He had also been in contact with someone about initiating a capacity review, which in Ontario can be requested under the Healthcare Consent Act if someone believes a person is no longer able to manage their own affairs. He had been building, methodically and carefully, a case that I was declining. The capacity review alone, even an unsuccessful one, can freeze assets and create legal disruptions that take months and thousands of dollars to resolve. He had known that. Claire had found the emails 3 weeks before the wedding. She had printed them. She had given copies to Patricia through a secure drop that Patricia had arranged. She had said nothing to me because she knew I would try to talk her out of the wedding immediately, and she had wanted to handle it her own way, on her own timeline. She had decided that her timeline would be at the altar, with witnesses. "I wanted him to have to look at me," she said, "in front of everyone. I wanted there to be no version of events where he could say it didn't happen." I thought about that. I thought about all the things I had done carefully and quietly over the past 6 months. The lawyer, the doctor, the passwords, the deed in the safe. All of it good and necessary. All of it private. "Your father would have done the same as you," I said. "Public." She leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she had when she was 7 years old and the world had been too large. "I'm sorry I let it get this far," she said. "You saw it clearly when it mattered," I said. "That's the only part that counts." Patricia filed a report with the Ontario Securities Commission regarding Daniel's financial consultant contact, as several of the email communications touched on activities that potentially crossed regulatory lines. I will not know for some time what comes of that. But the documentation is thorough, and Patricia is not a person who leaves things incomplete. The Burlington property is still mine. The house in Oakville is still mine. The TFSA, the RRSP, the OMERS survivor benefit, all of it is exactly as Robert left it, careful and quiet and ours. Claire is taking some time. She moved back into her old bedroom for a few weeks after the wedding, which I did not suggest and did not discourage. We have been watching the old British baking competition in the evenings, the one she used to watch with her father. We have been making soup on Sundays. We have been taking walks along the lake in the mornings when it is still cool enough to see your breath. Robert used to say that the things worth protecting are not the things that cost money. They are the things that cost time. The years of dinners and arguments and reconciliations and silences that eventually become comfortable rather than heavy. The knowledge of a person that you can only get by staying. I think about that when I walk through the house in the mornings, past the photograph on the hallway wall that has been there for 20 years, past the kitchen table where Claire learned to multiply fractions, past the back porch where a man once asked me how much my land was worth with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. The land is worth what it has always been worth to me, which is not a number. And that is something no one will ever restructure. If there is anything I want you to take from this, anything at all, it is this: trust what you notice. Not what you can prove, not what you can explain in a way that doesn't sound suspicious or ungrateful or paranoid. What you notice. The quiet thing that happens in your chest when a question is asked one too many times. The shape of a conversation that keeps returning to the same place. That noticing is not nothing. It is your whole life of experience speaking to you. It is worth listening to. It saved mine.